Cryptic Killer, the case of the Zodiac Killer. 5 days before Christmas in 1968, 17-year-old David Faraday picked up 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen for their first date. They were going to a high school Christmas concert in Vallejo, a town just northeast of San Francisco. Afterwards they drove out to Lake Herman Road and pulled up next to the Reservoirs Pump House in the Vallejo Hills overlooking San Francisco. If you enjoy it, please subscribe it and like it. At about 11:15 p.m., the couple was startled by a thin beam of light shining through the window of the car's driver's side. As Faraday reached over to open the door to step out of the vehicle, he was shot in the head while still behind the wheel of his car. His body slumped across the front seat. Jensen scrambled out of the car and managed to run 30 feet before being shot 5 times in the back. Then the killer fled. The teenagers had been killed with a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. A woman who was driving by the area about 10 minutes later saw Jensen's body sprawled on the ground. She hit the gas to go get help and flagged down a passing police car. By the time that officers arrived at the scene, Jensen was dead. Faraday was unconscious but died soon after being rushed to the hospital. There were no witnesses to the shooting and the police could not find a motive. No sexual assault or robbery had occurred, and investigators found no connection with a jilted or jealous lover. The mysterious double murder remained unsolved. For whatever reason, someone decided to kill the young couple as they sat in a parked vehicle at a lover's lane spot. The search for the killer eventually became the hunt for one of the most elusive and terrifying serial killers in American history. 7 months later, Michael Mageau, 19, and his friend waitress Darlene Farron, 22, went out for the evening. At about midnight she parked her Ford Corvair at the Blue Rock Springs Park just 2 miles from the pre-Christmas killing of Jensen and Faraday. As the couple sat there, a white car pulled up beside them for a few minutes and then drove away. It returned and parked on the other side of the road. The driver climbed out and shone a bright light into their eyes. Mageau thought that it was a policeman until the man quickly opened fire with a 9mm pistol. Farron slumped down in her seat after 4 bullets ripped through her chest. Seconds later, Mageau was shot in one leg, the right elbow, and shoulder. The final bullet tore into his neck and ripped his tongue. The shooter then walked back to his car and fired another 4 or 5 times before speeding away. Farron, who was the mother of an 18-month-old daughter, died. The critically wounded Mageau lay sprawled just outside the car. Less than an hour later, a man called the Vallejo Police Department. "I want to report a double murder," he told the dispatcher. "Go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park. You will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year," he said, referring to Faraday and Jensen. When the police arrived, Farron was dead but Mageau was still alive. He later described the suspect as being a stocky, round-faced man, about 5 feet 8 inches, with light brown wavy or curly hair. Police learned that it matched the description of a man who had been seen parked outside Farron's apartment 4 months earlier. When Farron's babysitter had asked her about it at the time, she explained that the man was checking up on her because she saw him murder someone. Police now knew that the murder was possibly connected to the double slaying before Christmas, but that's where the clues stopped. Less than a month after Farron's slaying, letters arrived on August 1, 1969, at the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. The writer took responsibility for the slayings and provided details that only the killer was likely to know. "Dear editor," the letter began. "I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl last 4th of July. To prove this I shall state some facts which I only and the police know. Christmas * brand name of ammo Super X, 10 shots fired, boy was on back feet to car, girl was lying, sick, on right side feet to west, 4th of July 1st. Girl was wearing patterned pants, boy was also shot in knee, brand name of ammo was Western." He signed his letters with a distinctive cross inside a circle, the symbol for Zodiac, like the crosshairs of a telescope. Each letter included a third of a cipher. The strange symbols were arranged in 8 lines of 17 characters each. Taken together, the ciphers in the 3 letters comprised one complete message. The killer demanded that the newspapers print the letter in cipher on their front page, or he would go on a weekend rampage and kill more people. I will cruise around and pick off all stray people or couples that are one, then move on to kill even more until I have killed over a dozen people. The letters and ciphers were printed. The letter writer also said that the cipher would lead to his identity if police could crack the code. But they could not. The messages baffled investigators. Cryptographers at the Mare Island Naval Yard tried to crack it but were unsuccessful. Salinas High School history and economics teacher Donald Hardin and his wife finally broke the code after 10 hours of intense work. They had done it by looking for groups of signs that could spell the word kill because it was likely to be repeated throughout the message. I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest. Sick, because man is the most dangerous, sick, animal, sick, of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. The best part of it is that when I die I will be reborn in paradise and all the I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife. Compounding the challenge of deciphering the code were the message's spelling and syntax errors. Another letter was mailed on August 7, providing more details of the latest murder and leaving police no doubt that the author was the killer. Nothing more was heard until September 27, 1969. Cecilia and Shepard, 22, and Brian Hartnell, 20, were friends and fellow students at Pacific Union College in Angwin, California. They went for a picnic on the shores of Lake Berryessa about 13 miles north of Vallejo and about 60 miles northeast of San Francisco. They were lying on a blanket at about 6:30 p.m. staring up at the beautiful blue sky on that sunny day. A stocky man with brown hair came across the clearing and then disappeared into some bushes. He emerged a few minutes later wearing a hood and carrying a gun. "I want your money and your car keys," he said. Hartnell replied that he only had 76 cents, but offered to give it to the man. The gunman said that he was going to have to tie them up. He pulled out a coil of clothesline and had Shepard tie up Hartnell. Then he tied up the young woman himself. At first, he said that he did not intend to hurt them. Minutes later, however, he abruptly said, "I'm going to have to stab you people." Hartnell begged to be stabbed first. "I'm chicken. I couldn't bear to see her stabbed," he told the assailant, referring to Shepard. The man agreed. "I'll do just that," he said. He pulled a knife from his belt and dropped to his knees. He stabbed Hartnell about a dozen times and then he turned his attention to Shepard. She twisted and turned to try to avoid the hunting knife, but was attacked 24 times. She was stabbed in each breast, the stomach, and the groin in the pattern of a cross. When the assailant had finished, he walked over to Hartnell's car and paused. He used a felt-tip pen to draw a crossed circle symbol on the door of the Volkswagen and wrote, "Vallejo, 12-20-68, 7-4-69, September 27-29-6:30 by knife." A fisherman who was on the lake heard Shepard and Hartnell's screams as they were being stabbed, and then he saw their bodies lying on the shore. They were about 2 miles from the park ranger's station. He raced to the park's headquarters and returned half an hour later with Rangers William White and Dennis Land. Hartnell had managed to loosen the piece of clothesline with which he was bound and crawled 225 yards to the edge of the highway. Shepard was writhing around on the ground in agony and barely had a pulse. The Rangers wrapped them in blankets and waited for an ambulance to arrive. By the time they were rushed to hospital, the Napa Police Department had received an anonymous call from a payphone. "I want to report a murder," the man said. "No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. I'm the one that did it." Shepard died in Queen of the Valley Hospital 2 days later. Hartnell recovered, but by then police knew that they were dealing with the Zodiac Killer. He had left his calling card on the passenger door of Hartnell's vehicle. Officers located the telephone booth from which the anonymous call had originated in front of a car wash. It was 6 blocks from the Napa Valley Police Department's headquarters. The phone had been left dangling off the hook. Investigators found several fingerprints, but none matched any that police had on file. They also discovered a size 11 footprint at the crime scene, and an unusual pattern made by the sole of a type of shoe that was sold at Sears. By then, media publicity in Northern California surrounding the Zodiac Killer was growing. Police began receiving 100 calls each day from people claiming to know who the killer was, but none led to significant clues that could help solve the murders. It was his next crime that turned the Zodiac Killer into a major news story around the world. On the evening of October 11, 1969, yellow cab driver Paul Stine, 29, picked up a fare near Union Square on Nob Hill in San Francisco and drove to Presidio Heights. As Stine sat behind the wheel of his car at the intersection of Washington and Cherry Streets, his passenger put a pistol to the cabbie's head and pulled the trigger. Stine slumped over, dead. The gunman climbed out of the back seat. Once he was on the sidewalk, he leaned through the open window of the cab's front seat, ripped a piece of Stine's shirt, and wiped the cab with a piece of cloth to erase his fingerprints. He straightened up and fled on foot toward the Presidio. According to witnesses, he was stocky with horn-rimmed glasses and brown hair. Police arrived on the scene and discovered that Stine's wallet and the cash that he had earned from his previous fares were missing. That led them to believe that robbery was the motive for the killing. They swarmed the neighborhood in force, looking for the suspect, but a dispatcher had mistakenly broadcast that the suspect was an African American. 2 police officers stopped a stocky Caucasian man on a nearby street to ask him if he had seen someone who resembled the alleged killer. The man, who police later realized may have been the Zodiac Killer, replied that he had not. Police let him go. Officers flooded the Presidio with lights after a stocky man was seen running into the area. They searched with patrolmen and 7 police dogs, but Stine's killer was gone. 3 days later, police learned that the Zodiac Killer was behind the slaying. He sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle claiming responsibility and chiding police for not finding him when they searched Julius Kahn Park and a nearby wooded portion of the Presidio. He had placed a bloody piece of Stine's shirt inside the envelope as proof that he was the killer. He also claimed to have attacked 7 victims, instead of the 5 of which the police were aware. Investigators discovered that Stine had been killed with the same .22 caliber gun as Jensen and Faraday less than 10 months earlier. Thanks to witnesses who saw Stine's killer flee the scene of the crime, they now had enough information for a police artist to put together a sketch of the suspect's appearance. The composite, which was plastered around San Francisco, showed a heavily built white male with short brown hair and glasses who was about 5 feet 8 inches tall. In his letter to the newspaper, the Zodiac Killer threatened to shoot up a school bus. "School children make nice targets," he wrote. "I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the tires and then pick off all the kiddies as they come bouncing out." The threat was not taken lightly. It created widespread panic, and for weeks armed officers rode on school buses in Napa County. Police cars in Sausalito escorted buses to and from schools. Elsewhere in California, buses traveled to and from schools as they did on any other day, but drivers had been drilled on the appropriate procedures to follow if the Zodiac Killer attempted to fulfill his threat. The threat was never carried out, but communication from a man who said that he was responsible for the serial murders continued. On October 21, 1969, a man claiming to be the Zodiac Killer phoned the Oakland Police Department and said that he wanted to give himself up. He would only do it if he was represented by a renowned criminal lawyer such as F. Lee Bailey or Melvin Belli. He also wanted to speak to the host of a popular and well-known breakfast television talk show while it was on the air. Police thought that the request was unusual, but they were willing to play along. Belli and host Jim Dunbar agreed to be on the air at 6:45 a.m. to receive the call. At 7:45 a.m., a soft boyish voice came on the line. He said that he was the Zodiac Killer, but he preferred to be called Sam. Hartnell and 2 police switchboard operators were the only ones who had heard the Zodiac Killer's voice to date. They had been brought into the television studio to help verify the authenticity of the call. After hearing the voice, they shook their heads and said that it was not the Zodiac Killer. The call appeared to be a hoax. 5 days before Christmas in 1969, Belly received a Christmas card that included another piece of Stein's bloodstained shirt. The Zodiac Killer wrote a letter appealing to the prominent lawyer for help. "Dear Melvin," he began. "This is the Zodiac speaking. I wish you a happy Christmas. The one thing I ask of you is this. Please help me. I am afraid I will lose control and take my 9th and possible 10th victim." The police were only aware of 5 confirmed murders. Was he inflating his number by including the death of a young college student and the 2 young men whom he had injured? Were there more killings that had not yet been linked to the Zodiac? Police didn't know. 3 months later, 22-year-old Kathleen Johns was driving with her infant daughter near Modesto, California, on the evening of March 22, 1970. Another motorist in a white Chevrolet flashed his headlights and honked his horn to attract her attention. Johns pulled over. The clean-shaven and neatly dressed man told her that one of the rear tires on her car seemed dangerously loose. He pulled out a lug wrench to tighten it and spent a few minutes attempting to fix it. When she began to drive away, however, the wheel fell off. The man offered to give Johns a lift to the nearest garage. He then drove past it and took her for a ride through the countryside for several hours. He threatened to kill her and her child. She finally managed to escape from the car when he slowed down on the curve of a freeway ramp. Johns jumped out with her baby in her arms and hid in a roadside irrigation ditch. The driver pulled over and started looking for her with a flashlight that he had taken from the trunk of his car. He ran off when he was caught in the headlights of an oncoming truck. Johns made her way to a local police station to report the abduction. While she was there, she looked up and noticed the wanted poster showing sketches of the Zodiac Killer. She told police that man was her attacker. When they drove her back to her car, it had been completely burned. In July 1970, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter from the Zodiac Killer in which he made an unsubstantiated claim of having murdered 13 people. In October, he sent a Halloween card to the newspaper's crime reporter Paul Avery, threatening to kill him. "You are doomed," he warned. In a show of solidarity with their colleague, nearly everyone on the Chronicle staff, including Avery, began wearing campaign-style buttons that said, "I am not Paul Avery." Resulting media publicity of the threat prompted a tip that the 1966 unsolved murder of Sherry Jo Bates was similar to the Zodiac's confirmed killings. One evening at the end of October 1966, 18-year-old freshman Bates left the campus library at Riverside City College about 60 miles east of Los Angeles. After walking to her car, she discovered that someone had disconnected her vehicle's distributor coil, which disabled the car. According to the police's theory, the killer approached her to offer help. Then he dragged her behind some bushes and she struggled furiously for her life. Bates was stabbed in the chest and back, her throat slashed so deeply that she was almost decapitated. A letter sent to the local press in November 1966 said that her murder was not the killer's first and that she would not be his last. But the police had no leads. After an article about the case was published on April 30, 1967, identically worded letters were sent to newspapers, the police, and the victim's father. It read, "Bates had to die. There will be more." A state documents expert compared the Zodiac Killer's handwriting with the letters written to Riverside authorities and Bates' father. They appeared to match. If this was the work of the Zodiac Killer, why had he waited 2 years to kill again, the police wondered. 9 more letters were received from the Zodiac between April 1970 and March 1971, but his killing spree appeared to have stopped. Including Bates, he had taken 6 lives and seriously wounded 2 others. Nothing more was heard for nearly 3 years, until the San Francisco Chronicle received on January 30, 1974, the first authentic Zodiac letter to be sent in several years. In it, he claimed more victims, 37 in total. He signed his letter with the notation, "Me 37/SFPD0. Then he dropped out of sight again. In April 1978, the Zodiac Killer broke a 4-year silence. "This is Zodiac speaking," read the hand-printed letter written in the Zodiac's trademark blue felt-tipped pen to the San Francisco Chronicle. "I am back with you. In it, he mocked Inspector David Tashi of the San Francisco Police Department's homicide squad for his failure to crack the case. The detective had been on the case for 9 years. The police believed that the letter was from the same man who had murdered 6 people and wounded 2 others in the San Francisco Bay Area. Tashi was later removed from the case on suspicion that he had written the letter himself. There were no further killings, and experts were divided as to whether the letter came from the same man as the previous ones. Over the years, police in the 4 jurisdictions where the Zodiac killings had occurred, along with investigators for the state and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, questioned and checked out an estimated 2,500 suspects. One of the most prominent was Arthur Lee Allen. The Vallejo Police Department began investigating him as a possible suspect in 1971 after an acquaintance in his trailer park said that the retired teacher and former mental patient had fantasized about committing a series of murders. According to the source, he had talked about killing lovers in a lover's lane and murdering a cabbie. Allen denied that he was the Zodiac or that he had killed anyone. A July 29, 1971, report by California's Department of Justice was sent to the Vallejo police informing them that Allen's handwriting did not match that of the Zodiac Killer. Police found nothing incriminating during a search of Allen's home on September 14, 1972, nor were his fingerprints a match. Soon afterward, Allen was cleared after passing a 10-hour polygraph test, but suspicions never quite evaporated. Police made another attempt to solve the serial murders. They raided Allen's home in Vallejo in 1991. The items that they seized included a box of handwritten letters that spanned 25 years, handguns, some explosives, and his Zodiac brand watch. Allen died a year later, in 1992, at the age of 58. He was never charged in connection with the Zodiac Killer murders. A handwriting expert could find no link between Allen and the Zodiac. Police speculated that perhaps Allen had committed the murders and an accomplice wrote the letters. 30 years after the Zodiac Killer murdered his last known victim, forensic technology had advanced significantly. As San Francisco Police Department investigator Kelly Carroll pointed out to a reporter, DNA analysis was science fiction back in 1969. But by 2002, it was a reality. The San Francisco Police Department was able to extract a partial DNA profile from a fingerprint that had been found on envelopes that once contained the Zodiac's letters. Dr. Sidney Holt, supervisor of the San Francisco Police Department's DNA lab, also recovered DNA samples from the saliva beneath a stamp on a Zodiac card mailed November 8, 1969. It was tested against brain tissue from Allen's 1992 autopsy, but it was not a match. He was not the man who had licked the stamp on the letter. After 4 decades, the hope of closing the case becomes dimmer and dimmer. The San Francisco Police Department has put the investigation on hold and locked away 30 years of evidence to focus its efforts and limited resources on more recent cases. The man who captured headlines in the late 1960s and has not yet been caught still remains in the public's imagination. The Zodiac sent 21 letters about his crimes to newspapers in the San Francisco Bay Area. He signed each one with a cross inside a circle, and his cryptograms baffled police. Books and websites offer theories about the possible identity of the killer. In 2007, movie director David Fincher released the film Zodiac. It starred Mark Ruffalo as San Francisco Police Department homicide inspector Dave Tashi, Robert Downey Jr. as crime reporter Paul Avery, and Jake Gyllenhaal as Chronicle editorial cartoonist Robert Graysmith, who wrote 2 best-selling books about this unsolved mystery. In 2021, a team of specialists who investigate cold cases says it has identified the Zodiac Killer. The Casebreakers, a team of more than 40 former law enforcement investigators, journalists, and military intelligence officers. The Casebreakers is now saying it has identified the Zodiac Killer as Gary Francis Post, who passed away in 2018. The team's years of digging uncovered new forensic evidence and photos from Post's darkroom. One image features scars on the forehead of Post that match scars on a sketch of the Zodiac, the team said. We bow in front of you and thank you for watching. Please subscribe my channels.